Have you ever felt like anger is consuming all your energy? That moment when something or someone causes a whirlwind of emotions and it seems impossible to stay calm. We've all been there. Anger is a powerful emotion, but it's also deeply draining. It drains not only our emotional energy, but also our mental and physical health, leaving us more fragile and disconnected from who we really are. But what if there was a way to never let anger take over again? What if you could face any provocation or difficult situation with equanimity without letting the fire of anger consume your inner peace? That's exactly what Stoicism can teach us. This practical philosophy, developed thousands of years ago, remained a powerful source of wisdom for dealing with the emotional challenges of modern life. The Stoics, such as Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, believed that anger was one of the most destructive emotions and that it needed to be controlled in order to live in harmony. They not only taught us why avoiding anger is important, but they also gave us practical tools to achieve this. In this video, we'll dive into Stoic teachings and explore how you can practically never get angry at anyone again. We'll understand the roots of anger, learn to control our reactions, and find peace even in the most challenging situations. This isn't just a talk about philosophy. It's an invitation to transform your life and protect your inner peace. Before we start, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive alerts whenever a new video is released. Okay? Let's start by understanding why we get angry with people and how this feeling arises. After all, to solve a problem, we need to understand its origin. Anger often arises when something or someone doesn't live up to our expectations. Think about it. You expected someone to be respectful, but you were treated with indifference. Maybe you expected your efforts to be acknowledged, but they were ignored. Behind every outburst of anger is a sense of frustration. Something didn't turn out the way you wanted. But does this justify the impact anger has on us? More often than not, we are the ones who suffer the most. We become restless, lose focus, and feel exhausted. Anger takes us out of the present, distances us from reason, and traps us in a cycle of resentment. The Stoics identified anger as an emotional response that arises from our judgment of situations. Seneca, in his work on anger, described anger as a brief madness. He noted that when we are overcome by this emotion, we lose clarity and act impulsively, often making the situation worse. The key to never getting angry at anyone again is to understand that anger is not caused by others, but by how we interpret their actions. When we adjust our perception, we eliminate the emotional trigger. For the Stoics, anger was more than a harmful emotion. It was a destructive force that corroded the mind and spirit. They believed that understanding and controlling anger was essential to achieving true inner peace. Seneca was emphatic when he said, "Anger is the most repulsive and savage of feelings. It not only takes possession of the soul, but deforms it." But why did the Stoics have such a negative view of anger? The answer lies in their philosophy. They value virtue above all else, and anger takes us away from it. When we are angry, we lose the ability to act with wisdom, temperance, and justice, the virtues essential to a fulfilling life. Marcus Aurelius, in his Reflections, reinforced the idea that anger is a choice, not an obligation. He wrote, "You have power over your mind. Do not let anger take that power." This phrase teaches us that no matter how provocative the situation may be, the decision to get angry is always ours. Another important point of the Stoic view is that anger often stems from a desire to control the uncontrollable. We get angry because we want others to act in a certain way, but we forget that it is not within our control. This concept leads us to the next essential step, understanding the dichotomy of control. The dichotomy of control is one of the pillars of Stoicism and the basis for dealing with emotions like anger. It teaches us to divide everything in life into two categories: what is within our control and what is beyond our control. This simple but powerful distinction is essential to never getting angry at anyone again. Epictetus wrote, "Some things are within our control and some are not. We should focus only on what we can control." But what exactly can we control? Our action, thoughts, reactions, and decisions. What can't we control? The actions, thoughts, and words of other people. Imagine someone makes a rude comment about you. Anger often arises because we want that person to change or acknowledge their mistake. But do we have that power? No. What we can control is how we react to the comment. We can choose to ignore it, respond calmly, or simply reflect on its relevance. The dichotomy of control also helps us question our priorities. When we focus on things we can't change, we waste our emotional energy. By redirecting that focus to what is within our control, we avoid unnecessary frustration and anger. A useful practice is, when faced with a situation that arouses anger, to ask yourself, is this under my control? If it's not, why am I allowing it to affect me? Applying the dichotomy of control gives us emotional freedom. We are no longer hostages to the behavior of others because we understand that the responsibility for our inner peace is entirely ours. Anger and expectations go hand in hand. When we create unrealistic expectations about how people should act, we inevitably face disappointment. And these disappointments, if left unchecked, turn into anger. The Stoics warn us about the danger of expecting the world or people to behave as we think they should. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Expect to meet selfish, ungrateful, and irritating people. They act this way because they do not know good." This reflection reminds us that by adjusting our expectations to reflect reality, we reduce the likelihood of becoming frustrated. For example, imagine that you help someone expecting gratitude, but the person doesn't show appreciation. Your expectation of gratitude creates an opportunity for anger to arise. However, if you act without expecting anything in return, you are shielded from this emotion. This doesn't mean we should become cynical or suspicious, but rather realistic. People have their own priorities, limitations, and reasons for acting the way they do. When we accept this, we become more resilient. A helpful practice is to identify situations where your expectations led you to anger and reframe your approach. Ask yourself, was my expectation realistic? Does this situation deserve my peace? Now that we understand how to adjust our expectations, it's time to address another powerful tool against anger, empathy. One of the most powerful lessons of Stoicism is understanding that each person acts according to their own logic, experiences, and beliefs. This doesn't mean that all actions are right or just, but it helps us realize that most people aren't acting to intentionally harm us. They're just trying to navigate their own internal struggles. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you meet someone who irritates you, remember that he is acting in a way that seems right to him. And if he is wrong, it is out of ignorance, not malice." This teaching invites us to exchange judgment for empathy. For example, when someone treats us badly, our instinctive reaction might be to get angry. But if we stop and think about it, maybe that person is dealing with pressures we don't know about. Maybe they're acting out of fear, frustration, or even a lack of clarity. By recognizing this, we can reduce our anger and respond with understanding. Empathy does not justify inappropriate behavior, but allows us to see the humanity behind it. A practical exercise to cultivate empathy is, whenever someone irritates you, to ask yourself, what could this person be facing that I don't know about? If I were in her shoes, how would I act? By practicing empathy, you not only avoid anger, but you also create space for wiser, more compassionate responses. The Stoics believe that many of our emotional conflicts, including anger, come from resisting reality. They encourage us to accept human nature as it is, imperfect, unpredictable, and often flawed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, you'll find people selfish, ungrateful, dishonest, and arrogant. They are all like that because they do not know the difference between good and evil." This phrase may seem harsh, but it actually teaches us to expect less perfection from the world and from people. Accepting human nature does not mean condoning harmful behavior, but rather understanding that mistakes and failures are part of the human experience. When someone makes a mistake, we can choose to react with anger or accept that this is part of life. For example, imagine someone cuts you off in traffic. Anger arises because you expect everyone to follow the rules and respect your turn. But by accepting that people won't always act as they should, you can avoid anger and choose to respond calmly. A practical exercise in accepting human nature is to list behaviors that tend to irritate you and remind yourself that they are common and unavoidable. By accepting this, premeditatio malorum, or negative visualization, is a powerful Stoic practice that prepares us to deal with situations that could trigger anger. It involves mentally anticipating possible difficulties or provocations that we may face and preparing ourselves emotionally for them. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on the day's challenges before they even occurred. He wrote, "Remember that you will face difficult situations and irritating people today, but by anticipating them, you will be prepared to face them with calm and virtue." This exercise is not about being pessimistic, but about strengthening yourself for the unexpected. Imagine you're going to a meeting where you know there will be conflicting opinions. Before you go in, visualize someone disagreeing with you in a harsh or even disrespectful way. Ask yourself, if that happens, how will I respond in a virtuous way? This kind of mental preparation reduces the emotional impact when the situation actually happens. Premeditatio malorum also helps us stay focused on what really matters. By anticipating difficulties, we are less likely to react impulsively. A practical exercise is to reflect every morning on possible challenges of the day and plan how to face them calmly and rationally. First emotional impressions are like sparks that, if left unchecked, can turn into wildfires. When something angers us, our initial reaction is often automatic and intense. But the Stoics teach us that these impressions don't have to dictate our actions. We have the power to control them. Epictetus wrote, "It is not what happens that disturbs you, but your judgment about it. Reflect before you judge." This reflective pause is what the Stoics call prosoke, or mindfulness. It involves observing your emotions as they arise and questioning them before reacting. Imagine someone interrupting you in a conversation. Your first reaction might be irritation, but by practicing mindfulness, you can notice this emotion arising and choose a more balanced response. Ask yourself, is this situation really worth my anger? How can I respond in a way that preserves my peace? Practices such as deep breathing and simply waiting a few seconds before responding help you control these first impressions. Over time, prosoke becomes a habit, allowing you to face irritating situations with more serenity. Stoic indifference is a powerful tool for dealing with situations and behaviors that tend to irritate us. In Stoicism, external indifference are things that do not affect our virtue, praise, criticism, opinions, or even the actions of others. Learning to treat these things with indifference does not mean apathy, but rather consciously choosing what deserves our attention and emotional energy. Epictetus taught, "Remember that it is not what they say or do, but how you react to it that disturbs you." When we internalize this, we realize that we do not need to be affected by words or actions that are beyond our control. Imagine you receive criticism at work. Your initial reaction might be to get angry or defensive. However, by applying Stoic indifference, you can ask yourself, does this criticism affect my virtue, or is it just an opinion that doesn't change who I am? If the answer is no, you can simply ignore it and move on in peace. Practicing indifference also helps keep our mind centered. When we learn not to place excessive importance on what others say or do, we become more emotionally resilient. A practical way to apply indifference is to repeat to yourself in a moment of conflict, "This is beyond my control and therefore has no power over me." This simple reflection can diffuse anger before it escalates. Anger often stems from irrational or distorted thinking. When something angers us, we tend to create internal narratives that magnify the problem. "He did this to humiliate me," or "she's always trying to provoke me." These interpretations, more than the events themselves, are what fuel anger. Seneca said, "It is not the event that disturbs us, but what we think about it." This phrase invites us to question our own thoughts before we react. Imagine someone interrupts you in a conversation. Instead of immediately assuming it was out of disrespect, ask yourself, did this person really mean to disrespect me, or was it unconscious? Am I interpreting this in the most objective way, or am I letting my emotions get in the way? This pause to reflect allows you to assess the situation rationally and avoid impulsive reactions. Often, when we question our thoughts, we realize that our anger has no real basis. A helpful practice is to adopt a Stoic self-talk. Whenever an irritating thought arises, counter it with rational questions, and remember, anger is a choice, not an obligation. Patience is an underrated but essential virtue for those who want to overcome anger. The Stoics believe that by practicing patience, we can avoid impulsive reactions and develop a more balanced mind. Seneca described patience as the cure for the ills of anger. But what does it mean to be patient? It means recognizing that not everything will happen at our pace or in the way we would like. It means accepting that people are imperfect and that situations take time to resolve. Imagine that you are dealing with someone who is constantly provoking you. Instead of reacting immediately, patience allows you to observe, reflect, and respond wisely. Ask yourself, if I react angrily, will it really resolve the situation, or will it just escalate the conflict? Cultivating patience takes practice. A simple exercise is to remind yourself that in many situations, rushing to react only makes things worse. Pause, take a deep breath, and give yourself time to think before you act. Ego is one of the biggest fuels for anger. When we feel disrespected, ignored, or upset, it is often our ego that is hurt. Stoicism teaches us that by letting go of our ego, we can become less sensitive to insults and criticism. Epictetus said, "If someone insults you, remember that it is his judgment and not yours that matters." This phrase invites us to reflect. Why do we allow the opinion or behavior of others to affect our peace so much? Imagine someone makes a rude comment about you. If your ego is in control, you will feel offended and probably react with anger. But if you let go of your ego, you can simply think, that comment doesn't define me. It reflects more on the person who said it than it does on me. Overcoming ego is an exercise in humility. Ask yourself, is my reaction motivated by pride or reason? Do I really need to prove anything to this person? When we let go of the need for external validation, we become more emotionally resilient. Not all confrontations are worth the emotional energy they require. The Stoics teach us to choose our battles wisely, avoiding conflicts that do not contribute to our well-being or virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If possible, avoid arguments that only fuel conflict." This quote reflects the importance of knowing when to back off. Sometimes the best way to deal with a provocative situation is to simply ignore it or walk away. For example, imagine someone makes a sarcastic comment in a conversation. You can confront them, but that would likely escalate the conflict. Instead, ask yourself, is this situation really worth my energy? What do I gain by responding? Avoiding unnecessary confrontation is not a sign of weakness, but a strength. It is recognizing that your peace is worth more than proving a point or winning an argument. Anger, in addition to being a draining emotion, has a significant impact on mental and physical health. When we allow anger to take over, our bodies respond as if they are under constant threat. Our heart rate increases, our blood pressure rises, and our cortisol, the stress hormone, levels soar. This response is useful in survival situations, but when triggered too often, it can cause real harm. Seneca, in his work on anger, warned that anger is like a poison that we consume in the hope of hurting someone else, but which ends up hurting us more. He understood that anger makes us emotionally fragile and vulnerable, affecting our inner balance and our ability to think clearly. In the long run, anger can contribute to problems such as insomnia, anxiety, and even depression. In the body, it can cause frequent headaches, cardiovascular problems, and a weakened immune system. So, by learning how to control your anger, you're not only protecting your peace of mind, but also taking care of your physical health. Stoicism offers us a clear path to avoid this destructive cycle. When we apply the dichotomy of control, Stoic indifference, and patience, we realize that many of the things that irritate us do not deserve space in our minds. Ask yourself, is this situation worth the impact it will have on my health? Often, the answer will be no. By learning to avoid anger, you'll not only be preserving your emotional energy, but also building a healthier, more balanced life. The Stoics believe that all adversity, including situations that might provoke anger, is an opportunity to practice virtues such as patience, self-control, and compassion. Marcus Aurelius, in his Reflections, wrote, "The obstacle in the way becomes a way." This means that every emotional challenge is actually an opportunity for personal growth. Imagine you're in a long line and someone tries to cut in line. Your initial reaction might be anger, but instead, you can use this moment to practice patience. Think to yourself, this situation gives me the opportunity to exercise self-control and maintain my peace, regardless of this person's actions. turning anger into a virtue requires a mindset shift. Instead of viewing provocation as a negative thing, view it as a workout to strengthen your mind. Just as an athlete needs endurance to improve their performance, you need emotional challenges to strengthen your resilience. A useful practice is, when facing a challenging situation, to ask yourself, what virtue can I practice now? How can I come out of this situation a better person? This approach transforms anger into a catalyst for growth. Instead of allowing situations to dominate you, you become the author of your reaction and, by extension, the author of your inner peace. We have reached the end of this journey, but in reality, it is only the beginning of your transformation. Learning to never get angry at anyone again does not mean that you will never be provoked or challenged again. It means that you now have the tools to deal with these situations in a wise and virtuous way, protecting your inner peace. Remember, control over your mind is your greatest strength. As Marcus Aurelius said, you have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Now it's your turn to apply these lessons to your everyday life. It's not an easy path, but it's deeply rewarding. With each small step, you'll strengthen your mind, live more peacefully, and make a positive impact on the world around you. First, recognize your triggers. By identifying what triggers your anger, you can prepare in advance. Observe your thought patterns and how your body reacts when anger begins to arise. Practice the conscious pause. Those few seconds between the stimulus and your response are precious. Take a deep breath. Count to 10. Temporarily remove yourself from the situation if necessary. This small interval can make all the difference between an impulsive reaction and a balanced response. Cultivate empathy daily. When someone irritates us, it's rarely about us. Try to look beyond behavior, seeking to understand the needs, fears, or pains behind the other person's actions. As the philosopher Socrates said, be kind, for every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Develop your emotional intelligence. The more you understand your own emotions, the easier it will be to manage them. This includes naming what you feel accurately, accepting the emotion without judgment, and consciously choosing how to express it. Communicate assertively, using I language rather than accusations. I feel frustrated when meetings start late has a very different effect than you're always late and don't respect my time. Cultivate a grateful heart. Gratitude and anger rarely coexist. By training your brain to focus on the good, you naturally reduce the room for irritation. Take care of your physical well-being. A well-rested, well-fed, and exercised body is much better equipped to handle stress and frustration. Practice letting go. We often get angry about things we can't control. Accepting reality as it is, rather than as we wish it were, frees us from much of our anger. Always remember, choosing not to get angry doesn't mean being passive or allowing abuse. It's possible to set healthy boundaries, stand up for your values, and seek justice without being consumed by anger. This is an ongoing process. There will be better days and more challenging days. Be kind to yourself when you fail and celebrate each small victory along the way. True power lies not in never feeling angry, but in deciding how we respond to it. By mastering this skill, you'll not only improve your mental and physical health, but you'll also profoundly transform your relationships and your quality of life. I appreciate your attention and hope that these reflections and tools accompany you on your journey of self-knowledge and personal growth. Remember, every moment of inner peace that you cultivate contributes to a more peaceful world. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications, okay? See you in the next video.